Meeting will come to order, please.
Thank you.
The notice requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act for this meeting have been satisfied. Would you please turn off electronic equipment as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Attention, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mayor Becker.
Here.
Commissioner Amadeo.
Here.
Commissioner Blumberg.
I am here.
We have before us for approval minutes of our August 16th meetings. What is your pleasure?
I'll make a motion we approve those. I'll second it.
Mayor Becker.
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo.
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg.
Yes.
We will now open for public comment. You have 3 minutes. You may speak on any subject. There is also another public comment session behind us which will deal with ordinances and resolutions.
Sewell, 22 West Drive. Mayor, as an adult octogenarian, you have an excuse for your distorted reality. But your two co-conspirators have no rational, logical excuse. All three of you labor under most serious presumption, namely that you have a 2-year window of opportunity to right-size to one school. With this brain-dead notion, you blew over $500,000 for 2 years of a very redundant interim superintendent and an extra principal to replace Carney Ray. Mayor, I hate to burst your bubble and bring you up to speed, but you're about to experience a monumental educational train wreck of epic proportions. Read today's handout very carefully. It most accurately predicts the timing of the super snafu lawsuit filed by Gary Stein, who also brought us the very costly Abbott decision. Only this time, he seeks something far more radical, far more reaching with a court order. Stein seeks to expropriate school assets that Margate taxpayers are still on the hook for in the form of bonded indebtedness. If you three had a functioning gray cell amongst you, you'd be taking immediate corrective action. The only real and viable option on the table is to skip school consolidation and instead make Margate a sending district to Ventnor in order to achieve the requisite mandated diversity. Sufficient to satisfy the court order. Is this what parents desire or want? Of course not. It'll set off a firestorm. Yet it's the only viable recourse. You gents are going to have to bite the bullet and risk incurring the eternal wrath of parents. This is precisely the reason this move must be carefully planned and fully explained. If parents are made to realize just how critical this move is, you three have a serious fiduciary duty to protect and preserve two very valuable assets worth tens of millions of dollars, namely Tye and Ross schools. Tye can be sold to the Atlantic County Community College as soon as possible, as Stockton now realizes its capacity was maxed out even before opening. Tye's site with the rec fields would be perfect fit to enable students to acquire a far less expensive 2-year Associate of the Arts degree. So let's get on the stick and do what needs to be done now. 3 seconds for you, Mayor.
Thank you, John.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dan Gottlieb, 407 North Nassau. I want to bring up some issues surrounding the boardwalk. I know there's been a groundswell of support for the project. There will also be a groundswell of opposition to the project, and it will be very well organized, just like the Margate Citizens Question the Beach project was well organized against the beach project. And I think we have some really good reasons to be questioning this project and also opposed to it. First and foremost, this is an economic issue. Estimates are coming in, I'm hearing all kinds of numbers, but somewhere between $20 and $30 million to build the boardwalk. It would almost certainly fall on the backs of Margate taxpayers to some degree, if not fully. There's been no reports of state funding. I haven't heard anything from anybody, an official in the city of funding that would come from somewhere else. There's been talk about grants. I think that's pie in the sky. Furthermore, I think the estimate of 20 million is wildly optimistic. It doesn't include lighting, engineering fees, and crossovers, not to mention the ongoing costs of repair, maintenance, electricity, security, liability insurance, trash removal, and more. The total project cost could easily double the early projection of 20 million, in my opinion. There is no funding mechanism in place to pay for this other than Margate taxpayers, and there is no evidence to support the notion that the state of New Jersey would fund it. Even in the highly unlikely event the state was to allocate funds for such a project, why would Margate residents want it? Margate's character and quality of life is fundamentally different than other shore towns with boardwalks such as Atlantic City, Ocean City, and Wildwood. And Ventnor, our next-door neighbor, has both higher taxes and lower property values than Margate, in part due to their boardwalk. And I have some examples of that I don't think I will have enough time to bring them up, but maybe some other people do. Margate also has a lower crime rate than towns with boardwalks, including Ventnor. We still don't know the impact of the Dune project on property values and taxes, and it would be foolish to undertake a major new project of this magnitude until that becomes clearer. Margate has had to bear the brunt of an enormously disruptive beach project for the past 2 years, and that work is still not entirely completed. Why would we want to further disrupt our beach experience, which is such a major part of Margate's appeal and allure to both residents and visitors? If Margate was to find a way to fund a major infrastructure project, then it must address the city's most pressing need, flooding from the Back Bay. That has been the city's major problem for decades. We've already fixed, and I use the term loosely, something that wasn't broken with the Dune project. Unfortunately, that was out of our control, forced upon us by a vindictive governor, the Army Corps, and the DEP. This is very much in our control. Let's leave well enough alone, and next time around, let's address the real problem, I only need 5 more seconds, that adversely affects all Margate homeowners, directly or indirectly, naming, raising the Back Bay bulkheads and other protective mechanisms to mitigate against flooding from future storms.
Thank you, Dan.
Glenn Klotz, 118 North Barclay Avenue. I'd like to respond to some of the things that Dan has said. Actually, a lot of the things he said I agree with. I think there absolutely has to be an open debate in the town where all the facts about the boardwalk are brought out. We're not against that at all, okay? I've even said to the commissioner that I would like to see a survey done of the property tax holders, okay, all the property owners, which we don't have to ask for that, but we want that. Why? We welcome an open debate on it. We welcome a debate. I think at this point, to start throwing numbers, first of all, to start throwing numbers on the table is absurd. I can start throwing numbers on the table too, okay? I'll throw one just for everybody's edification. Belmar built a brand new boardwalk, 1.5 miles long, almost exactly the length of what the Margate boardwalk would be. Ours would be a little longer. It cost them approximately $10 million. So to put numbers on the table, okay, it's not apples for apples. There's differences between the two. At this point, I think is somewhat absurd. But I do believe, going forward, we need to do that. We need to focus on every single issue that Dan brought up, and we will do that, both sides, and we will have a debate. Now, I don't see that going on with the high-rise issue. I don't see that out there. So there's a difference in the process here, okay? We welcome a debate on the boardwalk. It has to be debated. It's a major change. Dan is right. And Dan is my old comrade on MCQBP. I agree with everything he said about the beach. We just differ on how it turned out, okay? Dan and his group will probably say it's to some degree fine now. Let's live with it the way it is. My group says no. We don't believe that it's fine. We believe it can be improved, okay? We won't want to relitigate the project. That's over. That's not that, we're not going there, okay? What we want to do is we want to improve the situation. There are a lot of people in this town that are not happy with the way it has turned out for many reasons, okay? Let me say something about the Ventnor Boardwalk. Just about everybody in here uses it. And some of you use it daily, okay? Now, I can't be giving crime statistics here right now. I don't have them. But I don't believe that that is a big issue. In fact, let me say the opposite. A boardwalk in Margate would provide more security on the beach. You would be able to, but it's a street, okay? You can put police directly on the beach. You can put police patrols on bikes. You can put emergency vehicles down there. A boardwalk saves lives, okay? It saves lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Art Portelli, 114 North Lancaster Avenue. This would be a little different than boardwalks. Again, I'm going to talk about the schools. We have a real problem with the schools, and I want to make sure that it's well recorded. We've dropped 125 students since 2014 till now. This can't go on, yet it is going on. I also looked at the planning department, and they issued 68 permits to tear down, just in the last year, to tear down homes that were affordable to young families, like $350,000 to $400,000. And they're going to put up $1 million homes, which are unaffordable. So they're not coming back. So we have to put that in our mind. We have very few students, and they're not coming back. We're not going to get this big influx from the casinos that we thought. It's not happening. Well, okay. What's the situation now that we have these students? Well, now we're affecting all of our 7 items of efficiency, which we're reporting to the state. All 7 of them come up unfavorable. I think that's pretty bad because you have, just look at the top 3, you have the administrators, the number of administrators per student is 50% greater than the state median is. Throughout the whole state, we're 50% greater on the number of administrators because there's been no action taken to reduce the number of administrators while the number of students are going down. In addition, the cost per pupil is 50% greater than the state median. And our building maintenance has gone up 90% greater than the state median. I think that should really tell somebody that we have too many administrators and too many buildings. We're not talking about closing a school. We're talking about cutting a building. Now, when the state looks at it with the eye towards consolidating districts, they're going to look down the list of all the different communities. And here we are standing out like a big giant star saying, here we are, unfavorable in every category. They're going to certainly want to consolidate. Well, here we are going to Fredericksburg, and that's the end, and we're sending district to Atlantic City. And here's Ventnor. They go to Jackson Avenue, and they're sending district to Atlantic City. And Atlantic City is sending district to Atlantic City. Well, let's then make this one district. It's just something that you're not going to be able to argue and fight for. It just can't happen. But if you decide the right thing to do and close a school, now instead of 2 half-empty schools where you're going to take on tons of people, you'll have one that might be 85% full, and you'll take on some. And that's reasonable. Also, if you close a building, your building maintenance is going to be way down. So it would make sense rather than have it dictated by the state, which is coming.
Thank you, sir.
Eileen Berman. I own a home at 113 South Harvard Avenue in Ventnor. We had some crime issues there. My husband was not comfortable living there. We now live at 109 South Pembroke, and our house has been for sale on Harvard Avenue since 2012. We cannot sell it, and when people, the realtors say, people aren't interested because it's so close to the boardwalk and because of the crime.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Lisa McLeod, 9501 Pacific Avenue, as of tomorrow. I went to school here with Maury. I am very familiar with the town, and I'm questioning, as I'm seeing buildings go up, specifically near Atlantic Avenue, a block away on Pacific, I'm seeing the eradication of parking. This tells me that we are trying to encourage more cyclists and more walkers. I'm trying to figure out how you're going to address the Atlantic Avenue situation with one lane and make for bicycling and for walking. That's what defines the town of Margate, is the walking and the bicycling. We seem to be looking at what transient people would like to do, and they too would like to bicycle like I would and walk along the ocean front. That's where we attract people. And I get it. I understand why there's a need to have stores and fronts and glass, kind of like the Revel, no offense, where we have people, or the ocean, where we attract people to come into our businesses. I get that part, and a nice bicycle rental, and a place where you can come out of your condo and you can use Atlantic Avenue to cross the street in the wintertime with the blinking lights. I get the whole thing. But really what is upsetting me is that we're not becoming pedestrian friendly. And this town is a pedestrian friendly town. And with the advent of business, which I'm a retired teacher, I don't know anything about business, but I do know that the boardwalk is free. And when you get to Ventnor and you get to Atlantic City and you walk up on the beach and you stand in the sand and you look at it and you say, this is free. Of course it costs money to put the boardwalk up, but it's free to us. It's been free to me all my life. I'm not talking about extensions and changes in times and when the boardwalk was extended. That's part of what makes this island friendly to pedestrians and homeowners. And I feel as though that whether we want a boardwalk or whether we don't, I feel like nobody's really asked us what we want. What do you want? How do you want to use Margate as your backyard or your living room like I do? And what I'm seeing is a shift away from the residents who utilize the ocean front. We're trying to change the ocean front, and it's happening in front of our very eyes. And I'll continue to come to meetings and to listen, but I would appreciate that the people that use the ocean front as their front yard like I do consider, I don't know how you would go about doing it, how you would change the plans that are already in place. But somehow, some way,
thank you.
our voices are going to be heard.
Thank you.
Good evening. It's Mark Rubin. I live at 117 South Osborne. And I'd just like to say that we were working recently with architects and engineers to rebuild our home, which is on the beach on Osborne Avenue. We have stopped all plans at this point because we are not going to build if there is a boardwalk in front of us. I have no desire to sit in my backyard while people lean on a railing and watch me barbecue, watch me play with my children, watch me swim in a pool as they do in Ventnor. My engineer, which is the most predominant engineer in Atlantic County, did a study, and he informed me off the cuff that this project, in all deference to Glenn, It will exceed well over $35 million. The upkeep will be over $2 million a year to the city. I don't know where we're getting this money other than with tax increases. Glenn is a friend of mine. I stood next to Glenn during this entire dune debacle. I protested with Glenn on the beach. And I'm sorry to say right now that Glenn and I don't talk to each other because we have two opposing opinions here, which have a lot to do with my property values and my life. And this is what's going to happen to this town. There is going to be a disruption and a tearing of this town once again over this boardwalk nonsense. The money that is being asked to be spent can be spent to save the homes of my neighbors who live on the bay. Amherst Avenue is collapsing into the bay. We need the money to fix that. We need to stop the flooding in front of CVS every time it rains and our businesses there. We don't have the luxury to throw away on a boardwalk, and it will ruin our property values, the people on Beach Block. It will reduce the tax structure in the town. And it's going to cause division among neighbor against neighbor. And I don't want to see this happen again. I want to be able to talk to my friend Glenn again. But that's not going to happen right now because there's too much at stake for us who live on Beach Block. I have not spoken to a single person who lives on Beach Block. Not one single person who's in favor of a boardwalk. Now, you don't see them here tonight because they don't live here all year round. But you are going to hear from them. I can guarantee you that because there is a groundswell starting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie Block for North Brunswick Avenue. I just have a question for the commissioners, for the mayor, for anybody who can answer this. Can you please tell me if there is anything on the table or in the works that would deal with private ramping permitted by beachfront owners to access the dune, up to the dune, to the top of the dune? Or is there any deals being talked about for 99-year leaseholds, for that space between the bulkhead and the toe of the dune, for anyone that owns property there to make a walkway, a private walkway, not a public walkway, any ramping? Has that been discussed?
Mrs. Block, that part of the beach is controlled by the Corps of Engineers.
It is now, but when they finish the project, I assume it will go back to the hold of the city. And is that true or no?
No,
I can
that
answer,
is,
Mayor.
go ahead.
Yes, there was one. In fact, it's the gentleman who just spoke. He happens to own the beach. He's one of, I believe, 10 or 11 properties. Some of them deeded the entire property over to the state.
He owns the
But,
beach?
yes, he does. And the city, the DEP will allow these property owners to have their own walkway on their property to go over the dune. And that gentleman, he just happens to own that beach there, subject to the easement by the state of New Jersey for their sand dune, but he still owns the property. And so we were asked, and we passed a resolution, I believe, last month, which said the city has no objection if the DEP and the Army Corps want to let him have his own private walkway on his property to go from one side of the dune to the other.
Okay, can you explain a little further? He owns the property beyond the bulkhead.
At one
He owns
time,
the beach?
most of the beachfront was owned in private hands. Most of it for the, what are we, about a mile, 1.7 miles.
Okay,
And
for how
through the
many
years-
decades has it been public, though?
Well, there's a public right of access, there's a public park, but there are still about, I'll say roughly 10 property owners that own the beach in front of their properties. Same in Ventnor and
The
Atlantic
beach
City.
from their house to the waterfront?
1,550.
Some go out into the water.
Yeah, go out
Okay,
1,500.
so for all these years that these 10 unknown properties, or unknown to me
Unknown to
anyway.
you, yeah.
Unknown to me.
Well known to me, but
I'm
unknown to
sure.
you.
Own the beach.
Yes.
To the water's
Yes.
edge.
Beyond that.
And they have allowed the public.
Yes.
To trespass on their private
Not
property.
trespass. Not
To,
trespass.
well, to use their private
Yes.
property So that becomes a question of adverse possession. How many, it's been more than 25 years, and I believe that's the statute.
It's not adverse when you allow it.
Thank you. Interesting to hear.
Very interesting. It is very interesting.
Hello, Susan Rubin, 115, 117 South Osborne. As you heard my husband Mark say, we've enjoyed Margate for numerous years because of its walkability, its bikeability, and all that stuff. He has said that building a boardwalk would absolutely ruin our plans to develop the parcel that we now own, and we've stopped all projects with our local architects and engineers. I also have a question, of course, that's what I do. I'm holding the memos that Remington and Vernick engineers have set out regarding the boardwalk. And I noticed there was a letter dated April 9th that was sent to the New Jersey DEP to see if they were on board with this project. As of this date, I saw there was no response. I'm wondering if anyone knows, did we get any response yet from them? Because there are people making public comments on radio shows saying that the DEP and the Army Corps has green-lighted the boardwalk, and I'm not so sure that's accurate, and if you guys can clarify that for us. Has the Army said they're for this, or have we heard nothing from them yet?
Well, basically heard nothing, Mrs. Rubin.
Okay. That's what I thought.
There-
Okay. I also wonder, there's a memo here from Ed Wahlberg regarding the boardwalk construction, and if I'm reading it correctly, item number 3 says that one of the things that would be acceptable for a boardwalk to be built is the reconstruction of an existing boardwalk, which I don't think it meets the criteria of, and I'm just wondering if this board or the planning board, based on that, could absolutely deny that there's conditions favorable for construction of a boardwalk. That's a memo by Ed Wahlberg to Ed Wahlberg from Joe Johnson. There's no date on it, but it came from your website. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rubin.
Chuck
Sorry,
Shame-
sir. Go ahead.
Chuck Shaman, 1 North Granville. First, at the last meeting, I mentioned that after the paving was done with the gas repairs, gas line, there was no delineation marking by my driveway. The chief said he would look into it, and I want to thank him very much for doing that, and the next day, the line was put in. So thank you very much. The other thing I want to talk about is the boardwalk.
Well, wait, let us bask in this for a minute. You're a happy city.
Well, then turn the clock off.
For now. All right. I'm going to savor that.
Well, you've been here before. This is more normal than some of the.
Well, that's
other-
true.
Right.
I am opposed to the boardwalk. Several reasons. Number one, they talk about handicap access. Whether you're building a road, you're building a railroad, you're doing a ramp for a handicap, the key factor is the grade. The grade has to be below a certain percentage from point A to where you want to get to your peak. A boardwalk is not going to assist that, is not going to help that situation, because the boardwalk will be in front of our side of the dunes, and you only have so much distance from the seawall to get to the top of the boardwalk. You take out the boardwalk and you just put a ramp instead from the seawall to the existing dune where it is, it's going to be a much lower grade. Plus, you do not have to get up over the seawall. You can do it where you have cuts, which are, I understand, going to be expanded. So you can do a grade level crossing, and now you're even less going up and down. If you want to witness what it is, you go over the Granville ramp, which is quite steep. You go over to Huntington Avenue, which has got a handicap access ramp, and it's probably twice as long, and it's much, much easier to go up that ramp. Secondly, if there is going to be a referendum, if the commissioners decide on that, there has to be a monetary figure put on what the boardwalk is going to cost, and it is very, very difficult to estimate without investing a certain amount of money in plans, talking to engineers, talking to construction people, getting a rough idea of what it's going to be. And to go with the Belmar figure of 10 million, to go with another figure of 30 million, that's quite a spread. And I don't know how you can solve it without investing quite a bit of money in advance of that. But the other thing is that you do have the property owners. The boardwalk's been gone 80 years. I don't think Margate property has suffered from the lack of a boardwalk. Yet now you've got property owners who are built their homes without a boardwalk in front of them, and now you're going to try and put a boardwalk in front and tell them this is not going to affect your property, and I'm not sure what liability you would open Margate up to people who feel that they've been hurt by the construction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Hello, Rachel Bogotten, 8 South Brunswick Avenue, Margate. I don't know where to start. You know, I've lived here all my life. I'm in the house I grew up in, so I don't have the financial interest that a lot of the people that have spoken here have. I'm a winner any way you look at it. My parents paid $19,000 for my house in 1959. Having said that, I'm really concerned with all these changes all at once. We're talking a boardwalk. We're talking a hotel overlay. This on top of the dune debacle, which I just want to take a second and thank you all for fighting that as much as you did. We certainly really appreciate it. And I listened to the Rubens, and this, I think, is the most upsetting thing of all I've heard. Here are these people that have invested a substantial amount of money in property. The rules have been changed on them in the middle of the game, number one, by putting the dunes in front of their houses. And now we're talking about a boardwalk? So multiply them by all the beachfront owners in this town, most of whom can't vote. They're summer residents, and if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to afford to live here because they're not using our the schools, they're not using our services during the week, they come on weekends. I think it's just too many changes all at once, and we seem to be very disjointed. I mean, I think we're here, we're there, we're here, we're there. There's no consensus, there's no ABC thought being put towards any of this. And I'm really concerned as a property owner, and I don't like anything I'm seeing, and I've never thought about selling my house, but I'll tell you, I'm thinking about it now. And I'm sure I'm not alone, and I don't have nearly the investment that these folks have. So just take a second and think about what's going on here. And in my opinion, everything should be put to a referendum. Boardwalk, no boardwalk, the hotel overlay. I mean, let the people say what they think. And also, our summer people who don't have a vote, nor do I think they should have a vote, because I know the Constitution says one vote, one place, and they've chosen to live elsewhere. But at the same time, they need to have a say in what's going on here. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn Klotz, 118 North Barclay. I just want to address something that Mr.
Glenn,
Rubin said.
briefly, so everybody gets a chance.
Yes,
Glenn, okay.
real quickly, okay? I'm sorry he feels as though this proposal is dividing the community, okay? Maybe he should consider that the reason, okay, is because our last governor basically has done what he has done to our beach, okay, against the will of the people, all right? Where we differ, okay, is how to correct some of the deficiencies of the project. My family owns the home right across the street from him, okay? And they don't feel the same way, okay, about the project as he does, all right? I've had to speak with my family about it, all right? And I don't think everybody along the beachfront feels that way or in the beach blocks. We can find that out to some degree. Like I said, we can do a survey, all right? But ultimately, I think this issue and others, including I would like to see the high-rise issue brought up and letting the people decide when, and if that's divisive, I'm sorry about that, but that's democracy. That's the system that we have. If they don't like the system, they can go to some other country that doesn't have a democracy.
If Glenn got a minute and a half, I'd like to take a minute and a half just to rebut a couple things. One is the $30 million number was not fabricated or made up. Atlantic City just did 1,500 feet and it cost $5 million. We have at least 6 times 1,500 feet. So you can multiply 6 times 5 million and come up with a number of 30 million. Also, we live in a democracy. How is it a democracy when most of our residents who pay the salaries of a lot of people in this room can't vote for something that's going to affect them as horribly as this will? So that is That is taxation without representation, and that is not a democracy. Thank you.
Can't help it. Bess Soffer, 6 South Barclay. I've heard numerous reasons why there shouldn't be a boardwalk, but I haven't heard one thing about any of the statistics that we in Margate have heard about accidents from bikers and walkers on Atlantic Avenue. I personally have a very good friend that was hospitalized for months and had numerous surgeries because he was hit by traffic while he was riding his bike. I think a boardwalk would eliminate much of that, much of the accidents that do occur on Atlantic Avenue to those people that are walking with their families and biking up and down the island.
You may.
Carol Lipson, 112 South
To the
Pembroke.
microphone, please.
112 South Pembroke, Carol Lipson. And the bikers don't follow, most of the bikers don't follow the rules. Every time I come out of Pembroke, and it's a good thing, I have a green light and I'm ready to go, the cars are stopped on Atlantic Avenue, and I'm about to go through and a biker whizzes right through the red light in front of me. It's happened at least half a dozen times this summer. And if I weren't going slowly and I'd started and he was there, I would have hit him. And I pulled up beside him on the road and I beat my horn over my window. I said, "You went through the light, I could have killed you. I wasn't expecting you to be there." So a lot of it, and then when people cross, some people think they can go through a red light when there's a light on the corner. Most people don't do that, but there are a number who do. Well, there's a rule, I'm a pedestrian, I can go. So the rules, and they shouldn't. If there's a red light, they should wait and then go, because the cars aren't expecting them to go when their light's red. So I mean, the pedestrians and bikers aren't following safety rules, and that's causing a problem. Maybe there's a way we can communicate it better.
If you can find out, Carol, let us know, please.
Susan Rubin, 115, 117 South
Now, be real
Osborne.
short, Mrs.
I will,
Rubin.
very
Okay,
quickly. I'm just
please.
going to say, I must be odd. I live in Margate. I love to ride my bike on the bike lanes, following the rules. What I don't like is riding my bike on Ventnor's Boardwalk where it's 50 across, there's a million people coming, doing rollerblading, doing everything else. I don't find that to be a safe feeling either. I don't think we need a boardwalk.
Is there a motion to close this part of public comment?
Move that motion, Mayor.
I'll second it.
Mayor Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes.
We will now open public comment on introduction, no, we don't need that, for resolutions. Let me explain the procedure here. As Mr. Baranowski so ably described, if Ordinance 21 passes, it's scheduled for a hearing in 2 weeks, at which time there will be public comment again. So I just wanted everybody to know that. Okay? Public comment on resolutions on the agenda, please.
Michael, we have ordinance adoption number 21, which is
Okay.
the sale of property.
All
That's
right.
public comment also.
You're correct, thank you. I'm sorry I missed that. Ordinance 21 is an ordinance no, that's you.
We've got our numbers
We
mixed
need
up here,
public comment
Mayor.
on resolutions and ordinances, Mayor.
Mayor, we got the numbers mixed up. What the ordinance that's before us tonight is 21 of 2018, captioned to an ordinance to authorize private sale of real
Correct.
property. That's what we
Is
have.
on for adoption.
Correct. Okay.
The other ordinance is the land use
Right,
amendments.
correct.
It's going to be introduced.
Which is
Mr.
ordinance number
Next.
17.
Sorry, Mr. Baranowski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I stated earlier, my name is Robert Baranowski of the firm of Highland Levin. I'm appearing before you at the moment on behalf of the Harbor Vista Homeowners Association, who have some comments to make regarding Ordinance 21-2018. I did submit a letter today addressed to yourself and the commissioners. I also sent a copy of that to Ms. Casey. Just want to make sure that's a record. You have a very full plate tonight. You've already wheard a lot of comments, so I won't go into detail regarding the arguments set forth in the letter. I'll just cover really two salient issues that are set forth in there and reserve any other potential legal arguments in the event there could possibly be an appeal. As a threshold issue, the statute that regulates public notice of ordinances and the procedure for ordinance adoptions requires, among other things, a clear and concise statement prepared by the clerk of the governing body setting forth the purpose of the ordinance. And as I have read the notice of the second reading of this ordinance that's scheduled the matter for tonight, that notice does not contain a statement of the purpose of the ordinance, which is in effect swapping public land in exchange for bulkhead repairs and as part of development approvals for development along Amherst Avenue. That is, to me, a fatal defect, doesn't fairly apprise the public of what the governing body is considering for adoption tonight. I would submit that the ordinance should not be considered until that public notice is corrected and the proper concise statement of the purpose of the ordinance is included in that notice. In case other people in the public didn't see any purpose in there, didn't really feel the need to attend, they may feel the need to attend and present comments if that statement was in there. As a second issue, going to the substance of the ordinance, I respectfully submit that there has been no finding that the subject property is no longer needed for public use. This is, again, a requirement of the statute in order to sell public property, which the city has the right to do. Specifically, the statute says any county or municipality may sell any real property, capital improvement, or personal property or interest therein not needed for public use. And the statute, as you know, goes on and on at quite some length and includes a provision about contiguous property owners, which is the provision that you've cited in your notice. The parking spaces here that are at issue are badly needed by the public. They're in high demand, and they shouldn't be sold off. There hasn't really been a finding that they're no longer needed by the public, and I submit to you they are, in fact, needed by the public. And in fact, the association submitted a similar request to the city to buy some public parking spaces in front of their building on the other side of Amherst. I understand they were denied in that request. The denial of that request was based on the fact that there's a parking that's needed in the area. So I don't understand how on one side of the street we say parking is no longer needed, and on one side, other side of the street we say, well, parking is still desperately needed, so it can't be sold. I think we're bartering and swapping for bulkhead repairs here. It's troublesome. You can't give away property that's needed for public use every time a bulkhead repair is needed. The development on Amherst, in fact, we submit needs more parking and not less. These spaces shouldn't be given away or sold or bartered or traded. They should be kept for public use, and there's been no finding to the contrary. Therefore, we submit this ordinance should not be adopted. Thank you for your attention to that.
Thank you for your comments. Scott?
I would like to comment on several things. First, I did receive the letter questioning the legal notice. I believe our legal notice is adequate. We are allowed to utilize a short and concise statement. The statement does say an ordinance to authorize private sale of real property known as a portion of Block 528, Lot 2.03 on the tax map of the city of Margate to the contiguous owner. So I think we meet the bare minimum. Now, it could be prudent for us after you go forward on this. We could do it. We could notice it again. It's pretty obvious that this is going to go to litigation. It's the same attorney who's challenging the on the CAFRA permits, I believe, for Barbary Coast. So I still think you should go forward and adopt this ordinance tonight. I do want to make a comment, though. As one who personally knows, as well as a city official, these parking spaces were part of a larger parcel that at one time were designated as private parking spaces, actually for many, many years. They were part of a street vacation ordinance. That street vacation ordinance gave not 7 spaces, it was maybe like 15 spaces?
15 spaces.
And there was a concept that they owned this land. Now, the marina that's part of this site was foreclosed upon, but they didn't include this strip of land as a part of the foreclosure. We saw also a title defect in that under the law, because Margate had originally acquired a repairing grant and actually owned it rather than a developer plotting the street on a map. A lot of legal, very complicated legal concepts. But the bottom line was We got a quick claim deed back last year for this strip of land, which I think was 175 feet by 25 feet. Now, what Barbary Coast came to us and said was, we will rebuild the entire bulkhead along the entire marina, consisting of 175 feet. And just so the public knows, our engineers estimated that cost of bulkhead, including demolition, asphalt, concrete, miscellaneous improvements, is $443,681.70. That's what our engineer told us, the cost of this improvement that the developer is doing in exchange for the, I believe it's 70 feet by 25 feet of area that was formerly, up until very recently, designated as private parking. So the city did make a determination, and by adoption of this ordinance, does find that this area is not is not needed for public use. It's needed in a trade-off to save the taxpayers $444,000 and to replace a section of our Amherst Avenue boardwalk, which is severely dilapidated. And fact is, the developer has gone ahead and built the bulkhead and got it done. Street's still busted up. They have not finished the improvements. And once the improvements are done, the public shall have access along this waterfront in the subject parcel, which is referred to as a public pedestrian promenade or walkway along this waterfront that shall be maintained by the contiguous landowner, which is, at this instance, Barbary Coast, or any successor in interest. So I don't think it's fair to put the thought out there, or at least let's make it clear. The developer is paying very significant consideration. They deeded, or his predecessor deeded back this area, much larger area, to clear up the cloud of title. There was a problem with the title. The city adopting this ordinance will allow the developer to go forward with their development plans, build a brand new bulkhead that doesn't cost the city a dime, along with the street and sidewalk, the curb, the promenade, have it open for public use along there, just so that we're crystal clear what this ordinance is about. So as city solicitor, I feel very confident to say to you, adopt the ordinance as a prophylactic measure. If you want, we could have a much more complicated legal notice on this order. I could give you 3 pages of writing, but I think our city clerk did a good job. She followed the format that we've done on all of our other ordinances. So I think we're in good shape with the legal notice. But I suspect we may be going in front of a judge to see if they agree with us. That may be the case, and that's the American way. But that's my 2 cents and my recommendation as your city solicitor.
Thank you, Scott. Okay. Johanna?
Are we going to close public comment on ordinances and resolutions?
Is there any other public comment? Not yet.
Fred Tercey, 9400 Amherst. Obviously, I've been here before. Thank you for having me. Question for me is, last time I was here, we talked about the contiguous issue, and I asked about, did you offer it to the owner, Margate Day, who bought the water rights in the open area, which would be to the left, from my house facing the bay to the left, and then you got Harbor Bay on the other side. And the answer was no, we were carving out a section, and it's not really contiguous, only one property owner. So it seems like you're carving out a section to benefit one person. If you got this parcel of land, why wouldn't you just take the whole parcel and sell it? And oh, by the way, why wouldn't you offer it to auction? If we want to buy spots, I'll buy them across the street. You asked George Kennedy at last, you know, they paid a lot of money for that. Can you pay for it? You got to remember, we're 14 owners. We invested $9.3 million. That's not chump change. We're not dead pockets. We can afford it. So we're asking you, if you are going to sell them, if you found a reason that legally you want to sell them, then put it out for auction. Thank you.
Thank you. Last chance. Any other comment? Motion to close public comment, please.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mayor Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes.
Johanna?
Okay, may I have a motion to adopt ordinance number 21, 2018, an ordinance to authorize a private sale of real property known as a portion of block 528, Lot 2.03, on the tax map of the city of Margate City to the contiguous owners thereto pursuant to NJSA 40A:12-13.2.
I'll move ordinance 21 of 2018.
I'll second that motion.
Mayor Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes.
May I have a motion for resolution number 182, 2018, authorizing payment and claims?
I'll
move
make
that.
I'll second it.
Mayor Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes.
May I have a motion for resolution number 183, 2018, authorizing payment to Colmar Home Center?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mayor Becker?
I abstain.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes.
May I have a motion for our consent agenda, which consists of resolution number 184, 2018 through 188, 2018?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mayor Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes.
Thank you, Johanna. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Mayor Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes.
And thank you all for coming.